And on the phone, I have Kevin Lace. He's a retired Navy SEAL who did 2 tours in Iraq with Chris Kyle. He also co-stars in the movie American Sniper. Kevin, first of all, just, our thoughts are with you around this tragedy and our condolences. I wonder if you could just share with us a little bit about Chris and, for instance, his commitment to vets who were struggling and how he ended up trying to help a guy that was the wrong guy.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Dr. Drew. Chris was a team guy in every essence of the word. He really encapsulated what it was like to be a SEAL team member. And that brotherhood was something that he held really, really close. And, it was something that carried on after he got out of the Navy. He went back to Texas and started to take on a bigger role with, his local community and eventually veterans. And, Chris always held that close to his heart. And, this situation that ended up happening was something that he cared deeply about, and that was helping the people around him, part of that brotherhood.
How was he? I understand you spoke to him just before he was killed. How was he doing then?
We had a great relationship outside the Navy. Our friendship continued the years that passed when we both left. And, I ended up working with Chris. I spoke with him the day before, and we texted that morning. Chris was well. He was glad to be with his kids and, spending time back home, being with his parents and his brother. And, he was at peace. He was happy to be home. He was happy to be with that family unit.
And I wonder if you have any thoughts about this Routh fellow and his defense and the way they're building this case.
I'm a physician assistant by trade, and I'm not a lawyer, but what really strikes me is the use of PTSD, and I think it's a very important topic that's being talked about nowadays. But my fear is that PTSD, this will cast a long shadow and really classify people that do not fall into the category of the defendant, but this defendant is kind of misrepresenting those that suffer from PTSD.
Thanks so much, Kevin. I really appreciate you joining us. And Jesse Jane, this is my thing. It's an offense to people. Frankly, it's an offense with people with psychotic illnesses, too. Let's remind ourselves, this guy tortured animals. This guy, at least reportedly, this guy is disorganized to the point that it does not fit a typical psychotic illness. It fits a encephalopathy, which is a drug-induced phenomenon. So it's really the way this is being portrayed could potentially further stigmatize and harm others.
Yes. The problem I also have is that this stigmatizes veterans completely because the reality is that some of the most honorable people I've ever met in my entire life are my United States Marines that I served with. And I want to shout out to Kevin, Semper Fi, my Navy brother, because the reality is that when you go on active duty, the battery of tests we have to go through, most civilians can't even join. I mean, either they don't meet the mental standards, the physical standards, the police record checks, even the medical backgrounds requiring their drug usage, even since they were children. It is a very strict standard. This guy, Routh, got through the pipeline, and it's very unfortunate that he now is labeling all of us as crazies by clinging on to PTSD so that he'll have that sympathy card. I mean, they had to take the death penalty off the table because of that very image of Americans thinking that this veteran would be sentenced to death. So, there are deeper issues. I think the man's manipulative. Once he was diagnosed, he had a responsibility to maintain his health care. He refused to take ownership of that responsibility and is now leaning on the court system to get him off on this.
And Anna, that drives me crazy when people don't take care of their health care and then something terrible happens and then they want that to be the excuse, their medical condition. And that's where people like me who try to understand things get accused of making excuses for people that behave horribly.
Right. I agree with you, and I agree with the fact that the defense is throwing in PTSD for the sympathy factor. They're trying to show those jurors, look, he's a veteran, have sympathy. They're trying to humanize him because it is not a legal defense. But, Dr. Drew, from the defense attorney perspective, you have to pull out all the shots. When your client is facing life in prison, and when your client does indeed have documented mental history, you have to sort of bring this in. You have to do anything that you can to spare him life in jail. And by the way, it's not that if he gets off on this, it's not like he's going to be roaming around on the streets. He's still facing life in a mental facility.
Deneen,
either way.
Where we can spend our tax dollars on this guy?
Yeah, sadly.